Wombat Jones for Ramen Chokehold. I'm here with our writer, Jeff Kunkle. We're doing the UFC 221 wrap-up, mate. How are you doing this morning?
Pretty good, man. Not as good as you, obviously. You had a lot of fun over in Perth for UFC 221.
Mate, it was an amazing weekend. It was an amazing city too. Shout out to Perth. I had a fucking amazing time. I stayed at the fighter hotel with all the fighters and got to hang out with quite a few of them and had a little bit of a drink with quite a few of them as well. It was a really good weekend, mate. And what about you? You're on the other side of the world. What was it like for you watching the card?
Yeah, it was interesting. Straight off the bat, a lot of people were kind of giving them shit for the energy in the crowd, but I don't think what they realized is that it was 7:30 in the morning when that card started off local time. So it's kind of tough to get off your ass and go watch some people beat each other's faces in that early in the morning without even getting a little pick me up. So it was tough, but I think the crowd came around eventually, and it really lit up as we got deeper into the night.
Well, not only that, but for me, I mean, the first fight of the night, of the night, when I say the night, I mean of the morning, was just about the fight of the card. So, it sort of kicked the day off pretty well. The crowd was into it. Let me tell you, I mean, it was probably half full first fight. It really didn't fill up until around about the main card. It was kind of like a Las Vegas feel with that. But, that's to be expected. The main card didn't start until I think it was, something about 10:30 or 11 o'clock. So, but the Luke Jimmo fight, and I'm going to give him a massive shout out. That fight, he is an absolute fucking warrior. The way that he finished that fight, he was card. He had, there was blood going into his eyes and all that sort of thing. And the way that he come through that fight, I cannot wait to see if that takes his game to the next step. But big, massive shout out to Lukey there, mate. That was an amazing performance. Did you catch the first? Did you get all the fights in?
Yeah, I did. It's North America's world, and you're just living in it because it's 6 o'clock in the morning or in the afternoon watching these fights. It's easy to get up for those. I was super excited for him, and yeah, like Luke Jummo straight off the bat started the night off right. So I was super excited to get into the card. It didn't pay off at certain respects, but once we got deeper into the card, and especially Alex Volkanovski, as soon as he hit the cage and started putting on a clinic against, I think it was Jeremy Kennedy, I think the crowd started lighting up a little bit, and people watching at home definitely noticed the energy, and they fed off that.
Well, and this is maybe something that doesn't really, come through on the TV, and that's just how loud it was in that arena. I mean, at some stages, especially when Alex finished him, the crowd went nuts. And I have to be honest, it's possibly one of the loudest crowds I've ever heard. So big shout out to Perth. They turned up in their droves, over 14,000. I looked around for empty seats and could hardly find any. So that was awesome. But like you said about Alex, and I mean, Alex's performance was Khabib time, baby. Do you know what I mean? It was that good that people are starting to compare him, as the 145 Khabib. And I don't know what you think, mate, but especially to control a guy like Kennedy like that and absolutely destroy him, where Kennedy couldn't even mount any offense. Like there was zero offense coming Alex's way, especially when he took it to the mat. It was an amazing performance, and hopefully now he starts getting the recognition that he should be getting already. I mean, that takes him to 17 or 18-1, 4-0 in the UFC. He finishes guys, he grounds, he pounds. What do you think about Alex, man? I mean, what's next for him?
Yeah, so you compare him to Khabib. It's a bit unfair, to be honest with you, but there's really no other way to describe him. He really is the 145-pound version of Khabib. Obviously not as polished, but what are you going to expect from a guy? Like you said, he's 4-0 in the UFC. He's just really getting started. And to be where he's at already in his career in the short amount of time that he's done it is super impressive. And he called out Andre Fili at the end of the night. I'm not sure I really agree with his sentiment. He was talking about like he's the good guy and he wants to call out the bad guys. That was a little weird. Andre Fili seems like a pretty cool guy to me. So the call out was odd, but it was correct. It was the right call out. Andre Fili's the type of guy that he needs to go and fight. Fili's not the big name contender that we necessarily think he should be fighting right now, but it's a necessary step to usher him into the top 10. I think that's a fight not only he should get, but I think it's a fight he wins. And once he wins that fight, the sky's the limit for him, really, because that's a big name that he could have under his belt. And to be 5-0 in the UFC with a guy like that on your resume, it's really easy to get some bigger fights straight after.
I mean, it's kind of weird because sometimes the UFC have these fighters that they don't really get behind, or for whatever reason it happens, like for argument's sake, Max Holloway. I mean, he went 9-0 or something dumb before he finally got his title shot. And I'm not sure if it's a featherweight thing. I'm not sure what's actually going on with it. But I really do think that I'm struggling to think of someone who's going to give Alex problems with that sort of a matchup, So I really hope they start pushing him, especially. I mean, he's good on the microphone. He's very well spoken. He's clean cut. He comes across very well, especially for our market. How does it translate to you guys over there?
No, I like him a lot. I really do like Alex Volkanovski. He's not a star, and that's why the UFC isn't really pushing him, is because ultimately they have their Australian guy. You know what I'm saying? It's not fair, really, but in their eyes, they've got their Irish guys, so they're not really interested in promoting anyone else. They got their Russian guys, so they're not really, they let Tumenov fall by the wayside because they already got Khabib. They already, to a certain extent, have their Aussies, so it's going to be tough for Volkanovski to break through. But guys like me who are, hardcore in the fan base and everybody else who kind of echoes my place in the community, I think everyone's really gotten behind him, especially even in just North America. Obviously, Australia, he's got a lot of hype behind him. But, yeah, I really want to see him in a big fight. And you talk about who's going to give him trouble. 145 is tough, man. Like, once you get to the top, we were talking about this just the other day. Like, Chad Mendes is going to be coming back in July. He's probably the one guy who can match him in grappling. So that would be a really interesting contest in the next couple of years. Frankie Edgar, Brian Ortega, and he's submitting everybody in guard. Like, there's some really tough guys that he's going to have to work through. But I honestly think he can do it, or at the very least compete with those guys. I don't think he's, a flash in the pan. I think he really is going to be a contender for years to come.
I just hope his next fight is over in America, hopefully Vegas, so he can start getting, that fight community behind him. But, there's the alarm. You got to make sure you're on, everyone. You got to make sure you're on the ball. But let's move on, because the very next fight was, let's be honest, it was my most anticipated fight of the night. Israel Adesanya, who everyone, and there's been a few, he dropped a meme last night which was so perfect, where he was like, Israel Adesanya, yeah, I've known him for 3 weeks, because he finally started to get that hype behind him and all that sort of thing, and everyone started checking out his highlight videos and all that. Me and you know that we've been following this guy for quite a while, and I was absolutely pumped to see him do his thing. And when he did his thing, I don't necessarily think it was his best performance. And when he finished the fight, he kind of did this thing, which I very much understand. But he took on a very, very game opponent in Rob Wilkinson. And let me tell you, staying at the Fighter Hotel, you do get to see the fighters walk around on weight cutting day, especially when they're coming out of saunas, going to the vans to get taken to the weigh-ins and that. And Rob, out of every single person on the card, looked by far the worst. Like, he really did not look healthy at all. And big shout out to Rob for getting through that, making weight and taking the fight, because there's anyone, I think that he said 4 people turned him down to fight Israel. And Rob's that game is he puts his hand up, has a big struggle with his weight cut, still goes out there in round one. I believe he wins round one. But at the end of round one, I mean, I was watching him trying to get to his stool, and I pretty much knew it was over from there because he put all of his effort into round one to try and control Izzy. But as everyone's seen, you know, he might be a kickboxer, but try and hold him down. You know, what did you think about his performance, and were you as excited to see him as I was?
Yeah, I think he was definitely the most anticipated fighter on this entire card. Not just for me, not just for you, but everybody was talking about him. It almost got annoying because it's like, all right, let's just watch this guy fight instead of everyone hyping him up. But it's tough not to hype him up. Anybody who pays attention to kickboxing, but anybody even in the MMA community knows how dangerous this guy is and how fun this guy is to watch. So yeah, I mean, like you said, credit to Rob for stepping up and taking that fight, because there's not a lot of dudes who are interested in facing somebody like that who's already pretty polished, but he does have to take steps through the ranks in order to get up to the top. So there are going to be some lands led to slaughter in order for him to succeed. As far as his performance goes, everybody thought he was going to knock Rob out in the first round. That seemed to be the general sentiment, that he would just run through him and it wouldn't really be an issue. It would just essentially be a highlight reel. I was far more impressed with this performance than the performance we all expected, because he went through adversity. You know, I hate to always bring it back to Conor McGregor, but bringing it back to Conor McGregor, my favorite performance of his was against Chad Mendes, and it played out somewhat similarly to what Izzy had to deal with, the wrestler. You know, a guy who's going to grind on you, a guy who's going to be relentless with the takedown. He's going to force you to defend, and he's going to kind of smother any offense that you have in space. And both guys came out of there looking great because they dealt with the adversity, they came through it, and they were calm in their collection of themselves after the takedowns weren't really landing and they started defending. And Israel even said it himself. He saw that there was some doubt creeping in his eyes. I think early in round two, he sprawled on a takedown, and that was the last attempt Rob was able to make, because at that point, Izzy just pieced him up. Yeah, I mean, I was super impressed. His composure, I preach it all the time, but that really is the difference between the guys who are talented but never quite get there, and the guys like Izzy, who I believe will be, you know, contending for a title in the next couple of years. I really think he can be up there very soon.
And composure and complacency are very closely related. And sometimes when you watch Izzy fight, you think to yourself, oh, you know, is he being complacent? But composure really does sum him up, and you can see that the confidence that he does have in his takedown defense, all to get back up to his feet, because he is still very loose standing up, you know. So big shout out to Izzy. We did a big write-up on him, and Monty did some awesome art on him. So it's going to be great to see what they match him up with next. Who do you think he should be matched up with next?
So, like I said, I really think he can contend right now. A fight that I'm really looking forward to seeing in the future is Uriah Hall. I think that fight is old guard versus new guard. Uriah was the guy who was supposed to come in there, kind of take over what Anderson Silva had done for the many years with the flashy kicks, the overwhelming offense, the athleticism, all that stuff. Never really quite got there. And it really is in his head. I really do think that there's a lot of guys with some mental hurdles that they haven't gotten over yet. Uriah is on that list. Izzy's a guy who I really believe is Uriah 2.0. He's got the mental strength. He's got the composure. He's got the patience more specifically. I really like how he picks his shots. He just touches the guys. He's not looking to knock him out. He knows that the accumulation of damage will put him down. So that's a fight I look forward to in the future, but there's nothing in it for Uriah right now. They're not going to give it to him. Even for the UFC, they're just not interested in giving him that fight. not because they don't think he can win it, but because you got to build stars. You want to make that fight when Izzy's at his, peak, more or less. So a guy like Ryan Janis is someone I pointed out. He's a guy who is a bit of a grappler, but he'll stand and bang. His last fight with Andrew Sanchez, he stood in the pocket and he exchanged. And that's what Izzy needs. Right now, he needs a guy who's going to stand with him. Give us some exciting fights. I'm really looking forward to it because I know Janis isn't really going to have much for him in terms of a ground game. Let Izzy show off a little bit. Let him get some highlight reel KOs on his record. Let him build himself up. And hell, by the year's end, he could be fighting Uriah Hall because he's talking about wanting to be active. He fought 20 times last year. Granted, it's kickboxing, but still, he's going to fight a lot. So by the end of the year, I really think he'll be in some big fights.
So moving on from that fight, it was the top of the bill for the prelim card, and it was our man Beatdown Brown taking on DHK and Dong Hyun Kim, and I was excited for this fight. I mean, anytime you know Damian Brown's on a card, you're expecting an absolute barn burner, which it didn't really actually happen in this one. In fact, it was quite, lackluster. I still thought Damian won the fight. He definitely, for me, won round one. DHK definitely, for me, won round two. It was, for me, up to round three, which I think Damo did enough in it live. I haven't rewatched it yet, so don't hold me to it. But you were at home, mate. You probably had a better view of it than I did. How did you score the fight? And what do you think's next for our man Beatdown? I mean, he's I think that makes him 2-4 in the UFC, but there's no way that the UFC can cut him. I mean, he's definitely one of the fighters that everyone's keen to see on a card.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for him, to be honest with you. He's on a losing streak now. I think the fight with Dong Hyun Kim, it was close, and I see where people come from when they give it to Damian. I'll be honest, personally, I had it for Dong Hyun Kim. I thought it was the proper score. 30-27 isn't the proper score, but 29-28 I thought was fair. They were close rounds. As far as Damian's future, listen, we all want to see him fight at the highest level. The guy brings it every single time. It takes two to tango. I think a certain part of him expected Dong Hyun Kim to kind of come forward a little bit more. If you watch Damian fight, he's more of, I guess, what you would call an aggressive counterpuncher. So he walks you back and he pressures you, but he overwhelms you with the forward movement. He's not going to feint a whole lot and draw out strikes. He's not going to lead a whole lot. He forces you to throw, and then he comes at you with everything he's got. So it takes two to tango. I don't think it was really his fault. It's just one of those matchups that I had pegged for fight of the night, but it just didn't work out. So as far as his future, it's tough. I think they should give him another shot. They're going to be coming back to Australia sometime this year. And he's got a huge presence on the local scene. People love him. How could you not? He's a great fighter, and he's a super entertaining fighter, to say the least. So, I mean, I definitely think the UFC needs to give him another opportunity. I think they will give him another opportunity. But his back really is against the wall. I mean, at a certain point, you're exciting. That's great. But at a certain point, you got to start winning fights. The fights that he's been losing have been really close. So I think they give him another shot just because of that. But I think even he'd agree, the outcome of this next fight determines where he fights later on in his career.
Well, I just want to go back and touch on what you said about the scorecards, because for me, and this is a big point that I'm struggling with in my head, and it's possibly the reason why the fight played out the way that it did. But DHK had his leg broken in the first round. Now, I even made a tweet. I think it was responding to someone about who won the fight, and for me, I mean, who do you want to be at the end of the fight? Do you want to be at an after party sipping on some whiskey like I've seen Beatdown at his Engage after party, or do you want to be lying in a hospital with a broken leg? Now, for me, right there, just in itself, I understand that there's points and all that sort of thing, but I mean, we're talking about fighting here, and if someone's in the hospital and then someone's drinking, I mean, for me, I know who won the fight. What's your take on that?
Well, so we get into that. I personally, I love that way of viewing it. People call it the pride rules. Just instead of scoring it round by round, who do you think won the fight? Overall, who do you think, did the most damage? Who do you think controlled the fight? And I agree with that. That's where I think we should go. But there are also difficulties in that as well. You have biases. You've got guys who are wrestlers. And of course, they'd rather be in top position. If you get a guy like Frankie Edgar and then he's taking out Brian Ortega, if you have a wrestler judging the fight and he's judging it like that, if Frankie takes Brian down, we all know, T-City's guard. He's a tremendously dangerous guy off his back. But the wrestler wants top position every single time. It's drilled into them, since the time that they start on the mats. Top position wins matches, and in MMA, top position wins fights. So they're going to give it to the guy on top. Then you get the jiu-jitsu guy who's going to give it to Brian because he's controlling him, limiting damage, throwing up submission attempts. Bias, I think, is a lot more involved in that type of scoring. So that more than any other type of system is going to need some really properly vetted judges to make sure that it goes off without a hitch. I love that way of scoring it, but at the same time, that's not the way judges are scoring fights right now. That's just not the rules. I certainly would rather have been Damian. I don't need to be hobbling around on a broken leg after a fight. But he went away from the leg kicks, and I think that was really ultimately what lost him the fight. If he would have kept on those leg kicks, I think he might have been able to finish the fight with the leg kicks. Those low-line calf kicks, Jeremy Stevens almost finished Gilbert Melendez with it, who's a super tough guy. So if that can happen in that fight, Damian could have finished the fight the same way. He went away from it, and ultimately that's probably what lost him the fight.
And not only that, but if you ask Damian what his best weapon is, he will always say his leg kicks, and he's not really throwing them too much. So, Damo, get back to your leg kicks, champion, and then I hope to see you in the win column very soon. Then we hit the main card, and when I was talking about the crowd being loud, I'm going to give a big shout-out to Tyson Pedro's coach. I'm not sure if they showed it on the pay-per-view or not, but he's the one who started the fight, like the fire in the crowd, because after Tyso walked in, he got himself up, one leg up on the cage and started humping the cage, and the crowd went nuts. And it really kicked it off. Like, that really kicked the pay-per-view off. The crowd got involved, and then Tyson went in and put in an amazing performance, a performance that I cannot believe didn't win him $50K. I mean, that Kimura was brutal, absolutely brutal. And to do it to someone like Safarov, I mean, he's no fucking joke. You know what I mean? And he put him away pretty easily. So, mate, what did you think about that fight? That, for me, that was one of the best performances of the night.
Yeah, and there were a lot of great performances on that card. You got to give props to Tyson Pedro. I understand him not winning the bonus. It would have been on any other night a first-round Kimura where you essentially ripped a dude's shoulder off is going to earn you some money. But there were a ton of great performances out there, so it just didn't work out for him. As far as the performance goes, I think people look at Saperbeck, and just like they did in the Vellante fight, he doesn't look that good. I mean, granted, maybe it's a little superficial, but he's balding. He's beyond a dad bod. He's fat. He's got the chest hair. He just isn't an impressive specimen. But he goes out there and he's a nasty son of a bitch. And Tyson Pedro had his hands full, but he essentially ended the fight before Safarov could, wade into those later rounds and get him into deep water and really force his hand. Third round, Safarov's still coming at you with that cardio, taking shots. It starts to get a bit discouraging, so you do have to take him out kind of later or earlier in the rounds. So credit to Tyson Pedro. That was not an easy fight. and he did exactly what he needed to do against a guy like that. He finished him off early before he could get any momentum, and he really looked impressive.
And what do you think's next for Tyso? Because I mean, basically, he came into the UFC. He demolished Paul Craig very quickly, who was an undefeated fighter. They threw him Latifi. I think he learned quite a few lessons from that just by getting out wrestled, and now he's beaten Safarov. I think not only the way that he fights, but he's a fucking superstar, man. If you see this guy interacting with fans, if you see the way that he talks on camera, he's just a really, really cool dude. And I really want him to push him, because if you look at 205, I mean, who's a star in 205? You know, who's the one that's going to come through the ranks and actually sell pay-per-views? And I think it's him. I really want to see him go to the next level. I think he's there. I mean, that performance against Latifi, I mean, he got controlled and out-wrestled, but like I said, I think he learned from that. So I wouldn't mind seeing him up against, that top echelon again. Who could you see him fighting next? I mean, you mentioned Jean Vellante before. I think that's a pretty good matchup and a name for him. What do you think?
Yeah, Jean Vellante would be good. Definitely good. Definitely a great fight. I think he's beyond Jean Vellante in my eyes. I think a guy like Patrick Cummins, he's got a name in the sport. He's fought some legends. I think that would be a great fight for him. I think that's a great fight to usher him into the top of the ranks, because after that performance, I really think he should be getting top 10 guys. Patrick Cummins is just on that edge, I think he's ranked number 10 right now. So a win right there would put him into contention with those other guys. Light heavyweight is a bit of a muddled division right now. There's no standout guys. I mean, obviously John Jones, we don't know what's going on with him. Daniel Cormier has admitted that this is going to be his last year. By the time he turns 40, he's not fighting anymore. So that means we got 12 months of Daniel Cormier left. But after that, I mean, where do we go? John Jones could be moving the heavyweight. Alexander Gustafsson is a great fighter, but, what do we do with him? So I think it's time to start pushing guys like Tyson Pedro towards that. And I think that kind of fight is what's going to get him there.
So after that win and the crowd going absolutely nuts, the next fight was the one that won fight of the night, which was Jakey Matthews versus the Leech. And it was a great fight. It was back and forth. Jakey, in my mind, definitely won the fight. But I really want to touch on this because it's getting beyond ludicrous now with the amount of fouls that happen in MMA, and nothing happens. I mean, he had him in a very, very deep guillotine, which I think he was going to finish him with. And I think everyone's seen now that, the Chinese man was digging his fingers right into his eye socket to try and get out of it. I mean, I think everyone's seen the photo by now. And I just want your thoughts, because my thoughts on it is they're going to have to start doing something about it. I mean, I just read the Chuck Mendenhall article, which I don't really read anyone else's shit bar yours. So shout out to Chuck Mendenhall, because it was a really, really good article, actually. So if no one's read it, go and have a read of it, where he basically says, well, why wouldn't you start fucking cheating in MMA when nothing happens to you? You know what I mean? The referee grabbed his arm and tried to get it out, but his fingers were still in there basically until the end of the guillotine. Jake was pretty cool about it at the end of the fight. He said, it's a fight. Whatever happens in the fight happens in the fight. I was actually, as soon as I got back to the fighter hotel, I was staying with Rich Fogarty, and he used to coach Jakey, and we were there having a beer with him. Well, he was having a Coke. I was having a beer. But yeah, I asked him about it, and I said, how's your eye? Because he did have a cut on it before that. So, he said basically what happened was he made the cut a little bit bigger. But, what do you do with that? Do you take a point off? I mean, you can't stop it because he's in the middle of getting choked. Do you wait till the end of the round and then take a point off him? What the fuck do you think should happen with all this shit that's going on, where it's got to get stamped out somehow?
It's really very easy what you do. What you do is you stop the fight. You let them know, hey, listen, I'm taking a point. You fucking rate the guys. I mean, he could have how easy is it to rip out an eye? Can you rip out an eye? The dude almost ripped out his fucking eye, right? Like, is that possible? Because I'm pretty sure he came close to doing it. You take a point right off the bat, if not DQ him. Then what you do is you tie the leash's hands behind his back and then stick him straight into the guillotine, locked up and everything. And then make him work out without having to eye gouge people. That's the only way you got to do it, because at this point, Mendenhall had it right. It pays to cheat. Nothing happened. The ref even saw it in the middle of the broadcast. You know, he pulled his arms off of the dude's eyes. He looked at him. He said, listen, if you do that again, I'm going to take a point. Jake Matthews' eye was like filled up with blood. As soon as they get up, he's getting tagged. That obviously had a lot to do with it. The fact that he pretty much couldn't see, didn't have an eye. Who knows how much he could really see after that. How capital punishment? I don't know what the hell you do. I don't know. The only way to fix it is to get capable referees. It's ridiculous that we don't have guys coming up through the system that actually know how to handle that kind of situation. This is a really dangerous sport. And it's only aided by the fact that now guys are able to poke guys' eyes out, gouge them. But even the little things, nut shots, grabbing fences, 4 or 5 times before anything's done about it, it pays to cheat. Mendenhall had it right. It really pays to cheat. I think if I'm training guys, I go to the John Jones School of MMA. Keep your hands out. If somebody's about to land something, go poke him in the eye. You'll get a couple warnings, but who cares? You're gonna hurt the opponent, and you're gonna get out of that situation. So I think Jing Liang, within the rules, did the right thing. Morally, he didn't, but he knew that he could take advantage of those bullshit refs. So he did it, and he came out. Obviously didn't end up winning, but he got out of that guillotine.
I don't actually hold anything against the Chinese fighter here. I mean, this guy's in a fight, so if you're getting choked out, you're probably going to try everything you can not to lose. So it's not up to him to play within the rules, but the rules are there for a reason, if that makes sense, if you see what I'm getting at there. So yeah. you need to enforce those rules. Something needs to get done about it. I'd really like to have Mark Goddard on the show, because there's a few things about the card I'd love to ask him about. I'm going to touch on something a little bit later that actually really, really got to me as well. So let's move on from that, though. And the next one up was Bam Bam, baby. Now, I love this guy. This guy, for me, is right up my fucking alley, right? He goes out there. He fights his ass off. He looks for knockouts. He's finished every single opponent in the first round. He knocked old mate back to France. I'm not sure if you've seen that or not. That was fucking classic line. He did a shoey outside. He walks outside of the cage. Some guy goes up to him, pours a Jimmy into a shoe, and he sculls it. I mean, this guy, for me, he's exactly what the heavyweights need. He's a big, big heavyweight. I think he's got a massive future. He's a funny guy. He's up for just about anything. And it was a great performance against someone who's not high level, but someone who's a tough motherfucker, because that guy took a beating before he fell down. And you could tell how much of a beating he took, because as soon as he lost his balance and fell down, they had to stop the fight. There was no follow-up shot or anything. Like, his equilibrium was quite clearly fucked. Great performance. What do you see next for Double Bam, mate?
So hold on. So shoeys are an Australian thing, right? Like, that is just exclusively there.
Mate, to be honest, I'm not quite sure. I've heard of a shoey before. I've never actually done one, and considering I'm a bit of a drinker, I'm surprised by that. But I have heard of it. I've kind of seen. I'm not sure if it's an Aussie thing or not, but it's definitely an Aussie thing now.
The guy who handed in the shoe with the beer in it, it looked like a clean shoe. And that's a foul right there. If you're going to do a shoey, you got to take it off the grimiest, most disgusting dude, take it straight off his foot, crack open a can of beer, and pour it into this nasty ass like gym shoe. And then you do it. You don't go straight to Reebok and open up a brand new pair of sneaks and pour a fucking, what kind of beer do you, Foster's into the shoe and then do it. You got to get a little, muck it up a little bit. So that was bullshit right there. I want to call out Ty for that. As far as
mate, you can call him out for that, but hang on, I'm going to have to pull you up on something. First of all, no decent Australian human being drinks that Foster's shit, right? So you can shove that shit up your ass, mate. That's a European drink. You can't even find it in Australia. It's not on tap. You can't even get it in a bottle here. It's that fucking shit. So shove that Foster's shit up your ass. Shout out to Foster's. I'm sure you make really good beer. It's
what if
rubbish.
they're a sponsor later, dude? We can't be burning bridges this early.
Mate, they could throw $1 million at me and I wouldn't take it off them their beers, that fucking gromity. So, and not only that, but that guy was probably the only dude in the crowd wearing shoes, mate. We all wear flip-flops out here. So, shout out to the dude for actually wearing a shoe to give it up to him. But yeah, no, get back to Bam Bam, mate. And what do you think's next for that big fella?
So the heavyweight division for a long time has been essentially the same over the course of the 4 or 5 years. It really hasn't changed much. You got guys like Andrei Arlovsky, who just came off of, I think, a 5-fight losing streak, and he's still ranked in the top 15. So it's in dire need of some new faces. And for me, Tai Tuivasa is right up there. He falls under the same category as Israel Adesanya in terms of composure, in terms of patience, picking the shots. He's not rushing into anything. I don't mean to disrespect Derek Brunson, but it's the anti-Derek Brunson. You tag your opponent, and you're not falling head over heels to try and finish him. It's calculated, it's destructive, and it's demoralizing for a guy like Cyril Asker. He's up against the fence, waiting for that knockout shot, waiting for an opening where he overthrows a left hand or overcommits to something, and he just stays right in front of him, planted, lands little shots, touches him up, and really demolishes him in that respect. So I'm really excited to see where he goes from there. I think he deserves a big fight next. Not, top 5, top 10, but if you look at a guy like, Curtis Blades, he got opportunities when he was pretty early on in the division to fight, bigger name opponents. So as far as a name, I can't think of one off the top of my head really, but I think Tuivasa should start getting those opportunities to climb up the ladder, because I do think he's ready, and he is something that the UFC heavyweight division really needs, which is a fresh face, a guy who can talk a little bit. He doesn't talk shit, but he's just a fun guy. He obviously likes to have fun. He's a fun fighter. He's a violent fighter. He's not gonna, get into these boring matches. I'd like to see him against a grappler. I really would. Obviously, I love watching him stand up and knock people out, but these days we saw it with Mark Hunt in the co-main event. You can't just be, a high-level striker. So I'd like to see him be tested in that respect. But why not be tested in that respect against a guy who can, get him to the next level? So that kind of fight, I think, is well-deserved for Bam Bam.
Well, I think actually, moving on to the co-main event, Curtis Blades, after he beat Mark Hunt, he actually kind of did say, he mentioned Bam Bam's name, and Bam Bam in the post-fight interview said that he actually called him out on it, and he kind of backtracked a little bit. So I actually think that'd be a great matchup. Obviously, I don't think UFC will do that. But I'll tell you the one fight that I'm looking forward to the most for Bam Bam, and it's not going to happen for a while, but Bam Bam versus Derek Lewis is a firefight, man. Ooh, baby.
I actually had him against Chase Sherman for his next fight. And I'm starting to walk that back a little bit, but that would be a great fight as well. It would be an interesting dynamic. I don't think Chase Sherman is where Ty is, and I don't think he's as good as he's being hyped up to be. So I think that's an all right opponent. But yeah, Derek Lewis would be awesome. Really, anybody would be awesome. I really can't imagine he's going to get into a boring fight in his career.
So speaking of boring fights, in the co-main event, Mark Hunt come out first round, nearly finishes Curtis Blades. I was out of my seat. I was cheering him on. He couldn't get it done, and then basically Curtis got the takedown, got his senses back together, and whenever it got back to his feet, he basically ran in, double-legged him, and controlled him for the whole fight. It was good to see right at the end of the fight, however, that he got full mount and he was raining down elbows. And let me tell you, walking around the Fighter Hotel, this guy's a mountain. Like, he's 6'4", 6'5", built like a brick shithouse. And to have someone like that on your chest, fully coming down with elbows, I mean, Mark's an absolute fucking warrior. What do you see next? What did you think about the performance? What do you think's next for Mark Hunt? I mean, he's only got 2 fights left on his contract. He's obviously a massive fucking name. Everyone in Australia and New Zealand loves watching him fight. I think everyone in the world loves watching him fight, hence the reason why he gets paid what he gets paid. And he's worth every fucking cent, let me tell you. Shout out to his boys too. Ran into them a couple of times, had a good chat with them. And but yeah, I really want your thoughts on Curtis Blades. How good you actually think he is? Do you think he's improved from his last couple of performances? And what's up next for Mark?
Well, you know, against Mark Hunt, it's kind of tough to see where Curtis has got with his hands. Obviously, he got rocked really bad, and I'm really surprised that he was able to survive that flurry. He was, you know, 1 shot away from being finished. Double leg, just was working all night. So, you know, it was a really good performance, but it didn't encourage me to believe that he was going to be any better than I had already suspected. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't show me anything that I didn't already know. He's a great wrestler. I believe he was either D2 or D3 national champion. You know, so he's got a great pedigree in that respect. We need to see his hands come through, because once you get to the top of the division, you might not be able to take those guys down. If he fights Verdum, he's not going to want to get into his guard. If he fights a guy like Cain Velasquez, he's not going to be able to take him down. Even Alistair Overeem has some really underrated takedown defense, and eventually up to the champ Stipe Miocic, that's obviously not going to be an option. So we need to see his hands come behind his takedowns. You know, a lot of guys like to use their hands to set up the takedowns. I'd like to see him set up his hands with the takedowns, you know, kind of a reverse situation. He needs to game plan a little better. But, yeah, I mean, it's just another example of a young guy, a new face in the heavyweight division. It's desperately, desperately needed. And all of a sudden, we're starting to get those guys in there who haven't got a shot at the top, and now they're starting to get that. So for Curtis next, it's tough to go down. You just beat Mark Hunt. He's a legend. I think he was ranked number 5 going into this fight. You can't really usher him back down to, you know, the mid-tier heavyweights. So he's going to have to go up. As far as a name, you know, it's tough. I don't think Verdum necessarily wants to fight him. Not because he's scared, but just because what's in it for him. A guy like Cain Velasquez probably isn't going to fight him because he's a big name. Why would he fight him? Matchmaking is going to be tough for this guy. I think the UFC will ultimately be able to find him, you know, a fighter. I don't think he's championship caliber yet, but I was impressed with what I saw. Mark Hunt is not an easy guy to take down. A lot of guys see him as just a striker. Over the years, he has proven that he can defend. This isn't the, you know, pride Mark Hunt that we were accustomed to seeing, where he would get taken down and just mauled. So this was an impressive performance. For Mark Hunt, I wasn't discouraged at all. While he does have good takedown defense, in my opinion, this was always his kryptonite. If Curtis would have gone out and outstruck him and knocked him out, I would have been worried for him. But I thought he looked good on the feet. He just got beat by an American wrestler. That's how it goes. He'll get another opportunity. Obviously, his contract's coming up. From there, it's going to be tough. He's getting a bit older, but I don't think he's really fallen off too much. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here.
Well, speaking of older guys, we move on to the main event. and the 40-year-old Yoel Romero. It was very, very violent. I mean, it was one of the most violent finishes to a fight I think you'll ever see. That last punch, while Rockhold was sort of down and up against the cage, which was kind of reminiscent of the Bisping knockdown too, where he's kind of knocked up and he's sort of chins up against the cage, not knowing where he is. I got mixed emotions about this. I mean, obviously that fight should have been Robbie Whittaker versus Luke Rockhold. Once again, two bad weight cuts. Seeing Luke in the hotel the day before, he was very gaunt, very drawn out, massive weight cut for him. He's a big man. Like, he is a really, really big guy, especially to make 185. Yoel obviously misses weight, yada, yada, yada. I got real mixed emotions about this one. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but let me tell you, in the crowd watching the fight, it was fantastic. Great atmosphere, great fight, great way to finish the card off, but a little bit of a sour taste left in the mouth. You know, Rockhold can be a little bit arrogant and all that, but, you know, when it comes down to personality and dealing with the crowd, I mean, that guy probably spent the best part of an hour after his open workouts working his whole way around the crowd, signing, taking photos with fans, which I always love to see, because this sport's all about the fans. You know, fighters fight, that's what they do, but this sport is 100% about the fans. And for him, he definitely spent the most time out of anyone. And this was while he's going through his bad weight cut, turns up on a camel, which I took a few photos of. So, you know, I was really hoping for, you know, an epic back and forth. It was a bit slow first couple of rounds, but that finish was absolute fire. And now I'm not sure. Now, I'm honestly not sure I want to see Romero versus Whittaker. I mean, most people will. I understand that. The belt obviously wasn't on the line because he missed weight. I actually think I'd rather see Weidman Whittaker. What are your thoughts, man? What do you think? Obviously, I think Romero's next, but what do you think about the main event? What do you think's next?
Well, once again, it pays to cheat. I know it's not really cheating. You know, you miss weight. It's just things happen. But he had 6 weeks in camp. There's really no excuse for him to miss weight. I've never cut weight before, so I really can't get too hard on people when they miss weight, because I don't know what it's like. But when you have 6 weeks and you're preparing for a title fight, and it's the biggest fight of both guys' careers, you got to make weight. And he missed pretty egregiously. I think it was almost 3 pounds at the initial weigh-in. So that was tough. And it's tough to say if that played a massive factor in the fight. But, you know, that uppercut, I can't say it happened because he didn't, you know, cut that extra weight. But I'm just saying maybe things go a little differently if he depletes his body the way Luke Rockhold had to. I'll move on. As far as the middleweight title picture is concerned, it really didn't matter about, you know, missed weight. It didn't matter who won that fight. The winner of that fight was going to fight Robert Whittaker. It didn't matter. Everyone was so caught up in the interim title. I saw people on Twitter the day before, oh my God, like, what's going on with the interim title? Does Luke win it? Does Yoel still have a chance to win it? Should we give it the opportunity to another guy? The interim title never meant, you know, anything to anybody. Even the fighters don't give a shit about some fake belt, you know, to strap around their waist. They're interested in the undisputed title. Rob Whittaker obviously has that. I come off a little differently. I thought the interim title was necessary because up until recently, we didn't know when Rob Whittaker would be back. Obviously, the guy had like 4 or 5 injuries going into it, including something that was potentially life-threatening. So who knew really when he would get back? So I don't necessarily agree with the people who were in the camp of enough with the interim titles. This was one of the times where I thought it was necessary. But ultimately with interim titles, it's about who is the number one contender. Yoel Romero won that fight. Yes, he missed weight, but he beat Luke Rockhold. And that is a massive you know, chip on your resume. That's a really good win, and he deserves to fight Robert Whittaker next. I'm not super excited for the fight, to be honest with you. I'm okay with rematches, but the first fight wasn't really all that entertaining. It's tough to get up for it, but it's what has to be done. So, I mean, I guess it's got to be done. I would love to see Weidman versus Whittaker, but that's just going to come in due time. We're going to have to strap in for a rematch.
Well, I totally disagree with you on the first fight being not entertaining. I mean, as an Australian going for a title, he lost the first 2 rounds and then won the last 3 to capture the title. I don't necessarily agree with you that the first fight was not entertaining. But, look, I do agree, however, that, you know, it's very hard to get up for the rematch. I think it needs to happen in Vegas, not Australia, funnily enough. I think most of the titles should be held in Vegas. I wouldn't mind one in Australia, though, to be honest. But I really want to see Rob go to the next level. I think he is an absolute fucking superstar. I think Rob Whittaker is the biggest sleeper in MMA. You know, he's a very quietly spoken guy. He's very respectful to all his opponents. Every time one of his division wins a fight, especially right up the top, he's obviously watching. He always congratulates them, usually in their language as well. So he's on the Google Translate. So, you know, I'm interested to see whatever the hell Robbie Whittaker's doing. That's for damn sure. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, I think they make that fight next. I know Romero didn't have a broken leg, even though they said that he might have. It's only deep bruising to his shin, which is understandable because Rockhold kicked the shit out of it for the first round. So, yeah, look, great card. Sleeper cards are always great. I don't care what anyone says. They're actually the cards that I usually get up for the most. You know, if you look at 220, you know, if you look at the whole card, it was kind of, and then bang, you know, a couple of big fights. As where this card, you didn't really have that, but as usual, they produced the goods, baby. And I think the Perth crowd's got a big thing to, you know, they need a big shout out for what they did, especially like first fight, 7:30 in the morning. So fantastic. It was an awesome weekend, but that basically kicks off a massive, massive, massive run for Australian local MMA, which I'm all over, which starts this weekend, this Saturday, at the Whitlam Centre. It's Urban Fight Night 14. We've got Nathan the Vanilla Gorilla ready. He's taken on Randall the Reaper Ray for the pro lightweight title. That's absolutely fire. It's going to be a great fight. I'm going to be on the scene. I'm going to be cage side. I'm going to be covering it. We've got some interviews going up. We've got some articles coming out. Mate, what are you looking forward to the most on that card?
I mean, that fight right there is outstanding, but we got a feature coming out about Adam Asuncao. It's a name you're going to know in the next couple of years. And it's something that we're kind of focusing on. The amateur ranks are kind of a weird, they hold a weird place in MMA. A lot of guys fight once or twice on the scene. This is a guy who is entering his 5th fight on the amateur circuit. And he's even hinting at wanting to go after a belt eventually. So he takes on Billy Gordon. That's going to be a great fight. So that's definitely the one you want to pay attention to outside of the title fight.
And another big fight on the card is Dion Big Sexy Mooney. He's taking on Leo Laleo. I hope I said that right, mate. I'm sorry, I've got to work on my Polynesian names. But that's another big fight too, couple of massive heavyweights going at it. Also, Baden Mandic, he's taken on MGP at a catchweight. MGP, he's one to look forward to on the Australian scene at featherweight. So it's going to be a great night of fights. If you're in Sydney, if you're anywhere near Liverpool, get your asses down there. I was at their last event. It's a great event. They use full-size cages. They basically are now feeding Hex Fight Series, which is probably Australia's, you know, they're on Foxtel and they're leading the way in Australian MMA at the moment. So big fights there. We're going to have coverage with that. One last thing that I didn't touch on with the Perth card, and I definitely have to give him a shout-out, is one of my main mans, Ross Pearson, getting a win. He had 4 losses on the trot. I love Ross Pearson, man. I love watching him fight, and it's good to see that he's that something's clicked in his head and he's realised that he needed to evolve as a fighter. So I just wanted to give him a quick shout out, mate. Is there any other shout outs that you want to give out for the week? Like I said, it was a big week, Perth card. Now we're moving into the local scene. What else do you have for us before we go?
So this next week is actually a smattering of great fights. I'm gonna release an article about it. Make sure you guys pay attention, because I'm gonna run down the fights that you got to watch this weekend, because we're loaded. Albert Tumanov is going to be fighting in ACB this weekend. Obviously, you guys know him from the UFC. Is super exciting, so that'll be fun. Bellator's got a big card. It's the second leg of their heavyweight Grand Prix with Mitrione and Roy Nelson. I'm not a massive Roy Nelson guy. He's super overrated at this point, to be honest with you. I think people live off of his 2013, 2012 performances to say that he's exciting. He's not that exciting, but Matt Mitrione is going to stand and bang, and those two are going to get down. So that's a super exciting fight. Taiwan Claxton, he won the knockout of the year. He's coming back on the card right there for his second fight. And then obviously the UFC card, they got a couple good ones. We were talking about guys who were, a bit underappreciated earlier. James Vick, there is not a single person on that roster who's more underappreciated than James Vick. He's 8-1 in the UFC. He just knocked out Joe Duffy. His only loss is to Beneil Dariush, who has been a mainstay of the top 10 for 4 years now. And he's a featured fight in his hometown against Francisco Trinaldo, who, all respect to him, he's ranked below him, and he's really not a big name. So,
and that's what I was kind of touching on. Sorry to cut you off, but that's kind of what I was touching on when I was talking about Alex Volkanovski. Where some of these fighters just kind of get lost in translation or something. But like you said, I am a big James Vick fan. Like I think he is a massive sleeper in that division for a few reasons. Obviously, he's an amazing fighter. He's got to be the biggest lightweight in the world. He is a big, big man for lightweight. So, yeah, I really do hope that he gets an impressive victory and they start giving him a push. Yeah,
and one guy that they've been getting behind that I really appreciate, because he was kind of in that same area, but is the main eventer, Yancy Medeiros. He's kind of a new name in the welterweight division, but I'm really looking forward to seeing him fight. He's got a big fight. Cowboy's last performance was against Darren Till, a knockout loss. That was tough. But you see what happened to Darren Till after he got that win on Cowboy. So Yancey's got a big opportunity this weekend. As for Cowboy, I'm a massive fan, so I don't want to root for him, or I don't want to root against him, and I don't want to see him get knocked out. But this is a tough matchup for him. I think he'll come back strong. I don't think he's done. He's just got a few things to figure out. So that's an amazing main event. It really is. Like, that card from top to bottom, it's not sexy at all, but that main event and James Vick, and then you got Derek Lewis and Marcin Tybura in the co-main event. It's a pretty nice top-heavy card. So, you might miss the first few fights, but tune in for the main card, because it's loaded.
And, mate, you're off to Italy this week. You'll still be pumping out content. You still love your stuff. So, mate, you have a great trip. You deserve it. You've been working your ass off, especially for Chokehold. So if anyone hasn't read any of Jeff's stuff yet, make sure you jump on ramenchokehold.com. You give him a read, because he's basically doing all of our writing now. I'm concentrating on video. So, mate, have a great time. Thanks very much for spending some more time with us. And we'll definitely be catching up next week after a massive, massive week of fights. You're going to be concentrating on the international fights. I'm going to be concentrating on the local fights. And, mate, I can't wait to catch up with you then.
Yeah, hey, man. It's going to be a great week of fights, and I can't wait to get it started.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.